Quick, we are back in session. Parties and counsel are present. All members of our jury or alternates are present. And Ms. Rodriguez will now continue your examination.
Now, when we left off, we were talking about the fact that you would look at your dad and you would talk through the glass. Do you recall that?
Yes.
In fact, there was conversations with your dad where if you would bring something up over the phone when you would talk, he would tell you not to talk about the case over the phone, right?
That's been, yeah, that was a while back.
In January?
I don't think we were using the phones. The jail phones? Are you talking about the jail phones?
No, I'm talking about an actual phone call.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And he actually hushed you when you started to talk about opening statements?
Yes. Sounds right.
And you've actually assisted your dad's defense with the case, right?
I mean, I've tried to be involved. I think they are patient with me and tolerate me maybe because I'm going to law school this fall, so I'm trying to keep up with what's happening.
And you've gone to lunch with both Mr. McGee and Mr. Moline, right?
Correct.
How many times have you gone to lunch together?
Well, I'm only here once a week, so maybe 4 or 5 times.
And other than going to lunch with them together and going to Mr. Moline's office a couple of times, what else have you done to encounter Mr. Moline and Mr. McGee?
To encounter them?
Well, have you had any other interactions with them?
No, other than going to Raj's office and having lunch when I'm here, I don't think I've done anything else with them.
Who else has gone to lunch with you when you've gone to lunch?
Went to lunch with, I don't know their names, but I think they were in the courtroom taking notes. I think they were experts.
Well, have you participated in any way in a documentary film?
Yes.
And how have you participated in a documentary film?
They're filming a documentary about this case, and I've done interviews.
Have you been paid for those interviews?
They might have reimbursed gas mileage, I think.
Are you aware of anybody else being paid or profiting from interviews on the documentary?
Your Honor, I'm going to object that the foundation is outside the scope.
Sustained on foundation.
What do you know about the documentary?
I know that it's being made, and I know that they're filming the whole trial, and they're interviewing different people.
And what information do you have about who profits from it?
Your Honor, we need to approach now.
The objections sustained on foundation and relevancy grounds.
We'd ask counsel before we move on.
Objections is sustained. You can ask your next question.
Now, in 2014, your dad worked for Keene Engineering, right?
Yes.
And what did he do for Keene Engineering?
Your Honor, we need to approach. Yes, we do. This is important, Your Honor. All the prior ruling.
Denied at this time.
Your Honor, we'd ask to approach.
I understand. Denied at this time.
They're going to attempt to bring in exhibits that you previously excluded.
That would not be true
Well,
in this conversation.
So far there hasn't been.
It's in her hand. She just put it down. And this court's already excluded this. We dealt with
That's
this
actually
in
not
trial.
true, Your Honor. This
All right.
conversation should be had at sidebar.
All right, counsel approach. All right, the objection is overruled for proper foundation. Can you wait and we'll proceed with Rodriguez?
You just testified that your dad had gone to work work for Keen Engineering, right? Do you recall when that was?
2013 maybe, 2014.
And what type of work did your dad do for Keen Engineering?
Well, I know that they made different types of equipment for kind of sifting. Basically, it was like gold mining. Like you could put the dirt into the machine and it would sift through the material and separate it into the different things.
So your dad would basically be involved with creating machines that would do gold mining, right?
Yes.
I'm going to show you a couple of exhibits, 982 and 983, and ask if you recognize these. Recognize the person that's depicted in the photos.
Yes, that's my dad.
Just a quick question before we actually go into these photos. I noticed at break you were with the defense and you were going over some material. What material were you going over at break?
They just handed me on their laptop, it's a copy of the transcript of my interview with Detective Steers.
And did you also review anything else? Did you talk to them about what you were testifying about? No.
They just gave me the copy of the transcript.
And did they ask you to review certain sections?
Well, they showed me the sections that you had pointed out, so that I could read those sections.
And you just identified your dad. We'll start with exhibit 9.
I'm still objecting, there's still no foundation, Your Honor.
Overruled.
983, put it up on the overhead. And do you recognize what's depicted in this photo?
That's my dad?
And when is this photo from?
I don't know.
Okay, well, let me show you what's been marked as exhibit 982. You recognize that?
It's the back of my dad's head.
Okay, and he's wearing a Keen Engineering shirt, right?
Yes?
So this would be the time frame when he worked for Keen Engineering?
I mean, if he had to wear that shirt, yes. Yeah.
No object to speculation.
Sustained last answer stricken.
Do you recognize any of the equipment that would be in this photo?
I mean, I only ever saw maybe some drawings of things that he might have been working on at that time, because at that time I had already moved out of the house and I was kind of on my own, so I didn't really know too much about the work that he was doing.
Okay. And you were aware, though, that he was involved with making machines that would be able to mine for gold, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you had told us previously that you had several conversations with your dad after trial started, right?
Correct.
And you talked about the evidence that was presented during trial, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he talked to you about the phone towers, right?
Yes.
And specifically told you about the need to be at home on the night of the 4th because his phone was pinging off of a tower in the Riverside area. Do you recall that part of the conversation?
I don't know if he said he needed to be home, but I remember talking in general about the phone towers.
We talked about the fact that McKinley is a big street, right?
McKinley?
Or the street in Riverside.
Counsel wants to point out to the section of the transcript that she's referring to.
Otherwise, he's testifying who distracts.
Overruled.
Do you recall anything about that?
I don't know of a McKinley Street. I don't.
And your dad talked to you about the financial aspect of the case as well, right?
Sure.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
And then you talked about whether or not you were going to be called as a witness to testify, right?
Yes, I didn't know if I was.
And your dad talk to you about what he wanted you to testify about, right?
No, not that I recall.
I'm gonna, you sent this to him? I'm gonna show you page 9 of that interview.
Which, interview?
It's a visit from one.
What line? What line?
Line 6 and 7. Read lines 5 through 7.
Your Honor, the witness can be told what she's being refreshed with.
Ooh.
So you went to visit your dad, right?
Yes,
And at some point, like we talked about, you talked through the glass, right?
yes,
And you were made aware at some point that your dad's visits through the glass were being recorded, right?
yes,
And that was after you had gone to visit your dad, and in those visits, you talked about the case through the glass, right?
yes.
And then after you found out that they were being recorded, you stopped talking about the trial basically through the glass, right?
I would say that's accurate, yeah.
And so what I just showed you, you talked about what you were gonna have to testify about, right?
Yes,
So you talked to your dad about different things that you might be asked about, right?
well, just, it was,
Just a yes or no question. Did you talk to your
You can
dad
explain,
about
Your Honor.
different things?
Objection, you can explain.
Did you talk to your dad about different things that you were going to testify about?
I only saw the one thing that you showed me.
And your dad talked to you, in addition about the pseudonym that you heard about, right? Him searching for a pseudonym?
Yes, I think so.
So even if you weren't here in court, you've been privy to sort of everything that's gone on during trial, right?
I would hope so. I mean, it's my family that's going through this, so,
Okay, but you knew that you could potentially be called as a witness in this case, right?
yes,
And so you still were talking to your dad about different testimony that had occurred in court, right?
yes,
And in fact, you testified about events that occurred when you were approximately 11 to 12 years old to the time you were 15, back when the defendant worked for Joseph McStay, right?
correct.
And would it be fair to say that an 11-year-old probably isn't super involved in the business aspect of things?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. And so you have some pretty detailed information about that now though, right?
Argumentative.
More detailed than I had, but I still don't know too much.
I have nothing else, Your Honor.
David, you ready to wrap?
Yes, thank you. How long have you been, since your dad has been in custody for over 4.5 years, have you been visiting him on a regular basis?
Yes, we try to go every week. Sometimes that doesn't work out just because life and school and work and all that, but we try to go at least once a week.
And during that 4.5 year period, do you, when you visit your dad, do you talk about the case?
Yes.
And why do you talk about the case?
Because I'm like, our whole family is part of. Because our whole family is part of this entire thing, and this case is what made me want. This case is what made me want to pursue a career in law. So, going through this process and being able to understand what's happening in court has really helped solidify my decision to go that route with my career. Sorry.
In the entire 4.5 year period that you've been visiting your dad, has he ever once told you to lie for him?
No. He's actually been really specific. I mean, he's said, like, if you don't, thank you. Oh, Fox right here. He said, if you don't remember something, don't say it. And, as long as, like, I don't have any reason to lie for him.
So, when did you first meet me?
I first met you, I think the first day that I came to trial.
Did I ever meet you or talk to you before the trial started?
No.
And would it be fair to say that at the time that we met for the first time, I wanted you to review the transcripts, or watch the video, I should say, of your, not the video, the audio, listen to the audio of your interview, because it had been 5 years or whatever since you had given that interview.
Objection calls for
That's right.
speculation, calls for hearsay.
Do you know why? Well, you came to my office and you listened to your audio interview, is that correct?
Yes.
And it had been some time since you had given that interview, correct?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
Yeah, I interviewed with Detective Steers in 2014, and yeah, I met with you recently.
Okay. Now, I want to go over a couple of questions that counsel asked you. And she would come up and have you refresh your recollection and bring one piece of paper. It was part of a 55-page transcript. So during the break, I wanted you to review the entire portions that were shown to you when you were testifying.
Objection,
Is
is
that correct?
counsel testifying, move to strike his comments.
Sustained.
I gave you the entire transcript, is that correct?
Yes.
And I gave you, before we were able to print it out, I gave you Mr. McGee's laptop so you could start reading it.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And did you get a chance to review those sections that counsel gave you only one page of?
Yeah, I tried to get through. I mean, it's a long transcript. But yeah.
All right. You're not a speed reader though, right?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to just start with one of the questions she asked you about the movie theater. You had testified that you initially indicated to Detective Steers that you went to a movie theater. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you tried to explain that you corrected yourself. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then, were you able to read the entire context of that exchange?
Yes.
Okay. What do you recall now, after refreshing your recollection, you told Detective Steers in that regard?
Can I get page and line, please?
31 through 33.
Well, initially when he asked about where we were, I said I thought it might be a movie theater, but I wasn't sure. And then as I kept talking about it, I went on to say that I think I literally said, you know what, disregard what I said about the movie theater. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure that that's where it was.
Okay. But you do recall something about watching movies, is that correct?
Yes. Well, I mean, we're big movie buffs, so we watch a lot of movies.
And now, thinking back on that day, do you recall, do you have a memory of being in the clubhouse watching a movie with your dad on February 4th?
We could have been, or we could have been at home watching a movie. We didn't have internet at home, so, I mean, watching movies at home, we didn't have TV either, so, I mean, watching movies at home is what we kind of did when we were together.
And the argument that your folks had over this phone call, did you also get a chance to review that section?
Yes.
And you remember, she asked you something about the argument lasted for hours that day. You recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
And did you get to read the entire context of that section?
Yes.
And what did you tell Detective Steers about your parents arguing about that phone call from Joseph that your dad didn't answer? Yes. 32, well, it's 32 through 34.
I think it was just that the argument kind of went on, it was extended over the days as, you know, as he wasn't able to get a hold of Joseph, and it kind of continued the argument because then my mom, she went from saying, well, why don't you answer your phone to, well, see what happens when you don't answer your phone, like what if something could have happened? So that it extended the conversation about it.
And you also told Detective Steers that that was a habit that your dad had sometimes of not answering his calls.
Yes.
Okay. And that she directed you to a section on your comment that your dad was irresponsible about money. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
And can you explain what you meant by your dad being irresponsible with money?
I think it was that he was more concerned with kind of his newest idea or his like newest invention or his stuff like that. So he didn't really pay attention to the money. He didn't really care about the money so much. He didn't keep track of stuff like that. So he was more focused on just creating new things and what could he do next, what could he make better, what could he, stuff like that.
And your mom was more the finance person in the house that was concentrating on making a budget, keeping the budget, and stuff like that.
Objection meeting.
Is that why there was arguments between your mom and dad about that?
Yes, because she was trying to keep organized and he just kind of didn't keep track of stuff.
Let me interrupt you at this point. It's about noon, so we'll go ahead and take our noon recess at this time till 1:30 this afternoon. Keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you. Campus One were expressing their opinions about the case, not to discuss the case, and we'll see everything back at 1:30.